So we've been looking at the overall message of the Mishnah, and the general consensus is that this is Hillel's very strong message that studying Torah is super important, and you have to study Torah in order to grow. You can't be satisfied with it, but on the other hand, you can't be obsessed with your own reputation. If you succeed in studying Torah a lot, don't try to make it into a big deal for yourself, because then you'll lose your reputation. That's the beginning of the message. And then we have, if you don't study at all, then that's terrible. You're liable for the death, to be put to death. This is chapter 1, Mishnah 13. And we're going to get to the last piece in a second. But I want to just to bring up one interesting commentary, which is not the mainstream commentary, but which says maybe that's not the underlying subject that Hillel is talking about. After all, we notice that he doesn't really say, if you don't learn Torah. He says, if you don't continue to learn, if you don't continue to grow, in what? So we have been saying Torah, 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 but one commentary says that this Mishnah should be seen as a continuation of the previous Mishnah. And the previous Mishnah says, be a student of Aaron. And that specific lesson is what Hillel is emphasizing. And if you don't continue to try to learn from that lesson, then you will shrivel up. And if you're not interested in learning, then you are, grievously sinning. You should be put to death. So it's not simply about studying Torah per se, or about immersing yourself in the culture of Torah, but this commentary says it's very much about this particular type of message, this particular type of orientation of being the person who, like Aaron, loves peace, runs after peace, tries to be loving and conciliatory to every other human being. So I just wanted to bring that up as an interesting perspective for us to take to heart. We're going to be now looking at the last 3 words, which in the Aramaic, udishtamash betaga chalaf, which we translated here in our translations. We've got basically 2 translations, right? We've got our various more or less literal translations, and then we've got our translation by Rabbi Shapiro. So what is the more or less literal translation of that last phrase? Somebody want to just offer it up, please?
Shall pass away.
Well, the whole phrase, who's gonna pass away?
One who makes use of the crown shall pass away.
Right, and in
unworthy use,
What?
It says unworthy use in parentheses.
Right, unworthy use or worldly use, or the literal translation is use. You make use of the crown. What crown are we talking about here? It's pretty much unanimous. The crown means the crown of Torah. If you use that crown, you will perish. Rami Shapiro's translation is
somewhat different. Exploit what you know, and wisdom will evade you.
Okay, so he does it in a little bit of a more subtle way, but he says if you take what you know and exploit it, the wisdom will go away, right? So the message again is don't exploit it. Don't make some kind of, the word exploit here has that connotation, although it doesn't have to. The word use can just be a very neutral word. And even exploit literally is not necessarily a bad term, right? It means make use of to the fullest. But we always think about it, I hear it ringing in my ears as exploitation, right? Which makes unfair use. of something, using it without, either, if it's a person, using that person without respecting them, without treating them as an equal. But that, of course, brings us to the question. What do you mean you're not supposed to use the Torah? So he doesn't want to make it so terrible. You will perish. He says your wisdom will perish. So he's trying to like soften it up a little bit. But the message still is, don't try to make undue or unworthy or worldly, is already trying to answer it, use of the Torah. Well, isn't that what the Torah is for? Isn't it the Torah meant to use it so that, we have a different phrase, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. Here the phrase is, if you do use it, you lose it. So what could possibly be Hillel's teaching? What is he trying to say? What would be a wrong use of the Torah?
To gain something worldly, right? To gain
Something worldly,
like even status or control over others, or put yourself above others.
So how would you do that?
By claiming to know what
taking
God
notes,
said.
and I'm taking notes on this also.
It's what happens all the time these days, that people speak for God.
So people
God
speak for
means
God.
this.
So when people speak for God, are they speaking for God necessarily for their own self-aggrandizement?
No, it doesn't matter. In my opinion, it doesn't matter why they're saying that. They're saying that based on some interpretation of text. They're using the text to get to an end, which is to convince people to do something or another.
So all rabbis should quit.
No, I don't think rabbis speak for God. That's why I'm a Jew.
Well, it says Torah, using the Torah.
Using the Torah to exploit it, to gain something.
Well, if it's, that's what I'm saying. So when you speak, I'm trying to get clear about what it is that you're referring to. If you're saying speaking in the name of Torah to get people to do something, that could be, get people to pray, get people to be charitable, get people to keep Shabbos, get people to love their neighbor as themselves. So that's using the Torah. The Torah says that you should do this. Sarita.
So I'm thinking about somebody who might say, I'm an expert here. I know the Torah. I've studied it. I'm a learned person and you're not. So you should listen to me and support me. So that would be sort of using your knowledge of the Torah, for sort of self-aggrandizement and to make yourself more powerful. So that's one way I think that it could be worldly use of the crown of the Torah.
So that's this other part. I mean, John was mentioning.
The problem is we're post-Enlightenment people. That's the problem, right?
Yeah,
pre-Enlightenment, it wouldn't be a problem, but post-Enlightenment, it's a little bit of a problem for someone to tell us they know everything.
Well, according to this, Hillel was pre-Enlightenment, and he thinks it's a problem too.
Yeah,
so,
well, good for him.
So again, I want to distinguish between the Torah is going to be, and Hillel is telling us something here. Isn't Hillel violating his own prescription? He's telling us all of these things. Watch out. If you don't do this, it's curtains for you. If you don't study Torah, forget about it. If you don't go, running around pursuing peace, you're going to hell. So that's not quite obviously what Hillel thought would be the wrong use of Torah. When Hillel tells that guy who's standing on one foot, he says, now go learn, go study. He's telling him very, very, very directively things to do that he thinks are the right things to do. But what Sarita is putting in back is the ego business. We start with ego at the beginning of this message, right? If you're looking for your own puffing up your reputation, watch out. It'll just go like a balloon. It'll eventually burst. And then at the end, he's saying, and watch out for using this. Yeah.
And also, like, I'm better than you are, right? I'm better than you are because I know more Torah. Or, even, I think that part of this could be, we're the chosen people, we're better than you. I mean, that seems to me also to be in this vein where using, our sort of connection with Torah to aggrandize ourselves, or to make, to put ourselves in this hierarchy.
Okay, anybody else have suggestions? Lynn?
Okay, so in number 3, we're going back. Do not serve the master. Do not be like servants who serve the master in the expectation of receiving a reward, but be like servants who serve the master without the exception of receiving a reward. So again, personal gain is not, Sarita said that too. And then also in number 10, hate acting the superior and do not attempt to draw near to the ruling authority. So there's a whole, history. There's a whole preamble of keep to yourself, teach everyone who wants to learn, but don't stand on a pedestal and try to be in charge.
So, and I'm gonna question, don't try to be in charge. In Shomrei, if nobody tried to be in charge, we would never have an administration, right? We would never have a president. We would never have people running Shomrei week. We would never have anybody coordinating feeding the homeless. So, if everybody wants to be very modest and self-effacing and not being in charge, nothing actually worthy would get done. Lynn, yes.
But we are choosing to be part of this community. We are, this is horrible, but we elect the representatives, we hire the people who help us, we hire, we say we will follow you together as a community. We need structure and form. But I also think in terms of the ancient world, Judaism being pretty much the only religion or group of people that kept their own when they were conquered. They stayed Jewish for the most part. So there's a sort of if you are part of our community, we will make this happen in these ways. But if you are not part of our community, don't hold yourself over the top of other people or try to be in charge of other communities.
Right. So don't seek power over those other communities, but still, in the end, you need somebody to run for president. You need somebody to decide, I want to be president of the shul. It's not simply, well, we want to organize ourselves, so it'll just happen by osmosis, or it'll happen, automatically. Somebody has to actually do it. The issue, again, coming back to, I think, the crux of the matter is, in the end, what's the real driving force behind why you're doing it? What's the motivation? What are you really seeking to accomplish? If you're seeking to accomplish the good of the community, I want to help the community, that's one thing. If you want people to admire you, people to love you, people to be controlled by you, that's a different story. There's a concept that is out there. One time we
Rabbi, can I say something? I'm only on the phone.
So I can't see your hand. Okay, go ahead. Yes, Josie.
What if it's a little bit of both?
Okay.
Some people motivated by this need to be important and noticed end up doing a good job of advancing the stability of the synagogue, let's say. Some people, it's a mix.
Right. I noticed in the book review section, there's a big, long review in the New York Times. Do I have to say that, or is that taken for granted? So in the book review section of the New York Times, there's a big, big review on the front page and subsequent pages of President Barack Obama's first volume. It's only something like 750 pages of his first volume of his memoirs, and that's actually one of the themes that goes through this review is his what was his ambition, what is his own self-regard. He's very self-critical, but he's also self-regarding. So what are his motivations and how do you sort out both of those things at the same time? So somebody else raised their hand just now. Yeah, John.
It's always a mix. Anything you do creatively or anything you do that affects anything is always a mix of doing it maybe for somebody else, but also I can do this better, right? That's even an artist who paints a painting. What they're saying is, I see something no one else sees. It's like that idea that the evil impulse and the good and the creative impulse are kind of bound together, because that's a little bit evil, right? To say, I know better than you what this painting should look like, or sculpture or whatever.
A while back, I gave a sermon on the high holidays, and I told the story that the Talmud tells of the sages captured the Yetzer Hara. The sages finally, got hold of the evil inclination, and they, locked it up. And then the Talmud says for 3 days, nobody did anything. Nobody got married, nobody built a house, nobody did, because the evil inclination is the vital force that pushes you to do things. Now, the thing is, how do you channel it? How do you use it? How do you, marshal it? And what other, motivations do you put into it for that purpose? The evil inclination is the drive that we have, not to simply sit back and say, okay, who am I? No, let everybody else take care of everything, right? That's the extreme going the other way. So in the Shabbat morning service in the Amidah, the first blessing in the middle of the Amidah, the blessing that we recite in honor of Shabbat, because the beginning blessings are always the same every day, no matter what, the first 3 blessings. And then there's a middle blessing in honor of Shabbat. And the first words of that blessing are, Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko. Moshe should be happy with his given portion. Ki eved ne'eman karatalo, because you declared him to be a faithful servant. So a faithful servant. There's a concept called service leadership, that when you want to be a leader, you take on power, you take on responsibility, you take on status, but for the sake of serving, for the sake not of being the boss, not of being the smartest, the best, the most powerful, but because you are being entrusted with an opportunity to help people, because you have more power now than you would if you just sat in the back of the shul and just minded your own business. So to use this Torah knowledge, to use the power of the Torah, is inevitable. The question is, in what way? And what Hillel is leaving open is, if you want to use it for the wrong reason, then forget about it. I want to bring up that we had actually in the story sessions that we do in Kosher Salt, we just finished a story. It's a classic legend in Jewish tradition of Rabbi Yosef de la Reina. And this was a mystic who tried to bring the Messiah. And it's chock full of traditions and allusions to traditions about how to use the name and how to use the Torah's power to gain power, magical power. And this was a very, very important concept that many people believed in. If the Torah is God's word, then it must really have a lot of power. And what could we use it for? Let's use it to get rich. Let's use it to get married. I want so-and-so to fall in love with me so that that we can be together. I want this person whose guts I hate to leave me alone. or to drop dead, or I want to win the lottery. So I conjure up, I use. So that's a little, that's as we are, as John said, we're post-enlightenment. So many of us don't take that stuff seriously, although many of us actually do take that stuff very seriously. We just don't talk about it that much in certain circles. But to use the Torah as that divine piece of energy to accomplish different means, and the story of Yosef Tel Arena is a man who comes to bad ends because he uses it even for a worthy means. But he tries to bring the Messiah, but he ends up actually destroying himself and all of his followers. So it's almost like one of the stories of certain cults and so on. But here he was, he thought he was on the holy path. He thought he was doing everything for the sake of heaven, but he wanted to manipulate. He wanted to use it. He wanted to push it a particular way. Very tricky. Any other comments? All right. Guess what? We're going to go to the next Mishnah. So the next Mishnah. Just one more point, and that's it. Sorry, Lou. And that's the word taga. The word taga is crown, and that word is also the word that we use for the decorations on the tops of letters in the Torah. The little decorations are called tagim, crowns, and certain letters, 7 letters in the Torah, are decorated traditionally with little stems that come up, 3 little stems that come up on the top of the letter, and it looks like a crown. It looks like a tiara kind of thing. And those crowns enhance the Torah. And in the tradition, we have Rabbi Akiva was someone who could explicate the crowns of the Torah. When Moses comes up to get the Torah on Mount Sinai, God is still busy, says the legend, putting the crowns on. God still hasn't finished yet. And Moses says, what gives? Why don't you just give me the Torah? It's all done. He says, no, I still have to put those little crowns on. And Moses says, what do you need? So what? The crowns are just decorations. And God says, no, because one day there'll be a great rabbi, Rabbi Akiva, who will be able to derive more and more Torah just out of the crowns themselves. Forget about the words, just out of the crowns. So, and the rest of the story I'm not going to go into. It's a whole deep story. But we have those crowns to this day in the Torah itself, but we have them, we don't use them. We don't exploit them. Okay. Now, Mishnah 14, here we have one of the most famous sayings that Hillel has, and this is back to Hebrew, not in Aramaic, not in the vernacular. So who's going to please read for us Mishnah 14? Come on, somebody's got to read it.
Okay.
All right, Geraldine, thank you. Geraldine's going to read it for us.
Okay.
Okay, I hope I'm in the right place because I came in late. This was another favorite teaching of his. If I am not for me, who will be? If I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, when?
Okay, that's the simple translation, straightforward translation. And we'll go now to Bill for the other one.
Rabbi Shapiro has basically the standard translation.
Unbelievable.
Hillel teaches, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, what am I? He adds that but, and if not now, when? It's almost identical.
Right. Look at that.
Is that because everybody knows this one?
Right. He can't get away with changing it. So in the Hebrew, there's a certain poetic rhythm that we should pay attention to. Im ein ani li mili, uchshani le'atzmi ma'ani, v'im lo achshav eimatai. So the end stops the rhyming, and brings you into a more serious kind of question. So the first two parts are in sort of complementary relationship. If I am, if not for myself, who will be? But if I'm only for myself, then what am I? So this is the balancing act. To stick up for yourself, to regard yourself, to take care of yourself, but at the same time, don't obsess and don't be, a solipsist. And then at the end, the last one is, and if not now, when? Okay. And we're opening up the floor for some comments about this. Yes, Sarita.
So this is interesting to read it sort of in.
No, you muted yourself.
I put the book down on my computer thing, it muted. So the context for this is really interesting because we've been talking about two things. We've been talking about learning and the importance of learning. And so it's like, if you're not gonna do it, if you're not gonna study, well, then nobody can sort of study and learn for you. But then we've also been talking about using that learning potentially for self-aggrandizement. So, your motivation for learning shouldn't just be to make yourself look better, right? So I think that putting this in context really changes for me what is being said here.
So how did it change?
It's putting it into the context of learning and studying and how you use that information. Not just about going through life and not being selfish, but also it's not just about going through life and taking care of yourself, but not being selfish, but it's also, it's in the context now about learning and continuing to learn and keeping informed, but not not using that learning to just make yourself appear superior.
Okay, so it gives that extra kind of focus of where this whole sense of back and forth activity should be taking place. Good. About anybody else? Yeah, John.
It's hard for me not to sort of read politics into it these days, just because of everything that's going on. But it seems like a duality of self-interest and communal interest, that neither one alone is good, because if no one's for you, then that's self-interest, and who would be for you? But also, if you're not concerned with everyone else's state, what are you? It doesn't say who are you, it says what are you, which is overemphasizing the English, but it feels different to me than to say what am I? And if not now, when is just an imperative that, better get a move on. This is always urgent, this dichotomy.
Right. Yeah, I was going to go political before, and I didn't. And I'm struggling so hard with my Yetzer Hara now about whether I should go political or not. But guess what? I'm not.
You can always say some use this and some say that.
Right.
That's one way.
Right. Some say that the way that the people went to the Supreme Court in the name of religious liberty was using the Torah, exploiting it. Some say that. Okay, back to this. If we take Hillel again, if it's not just the context, but what is he adding? What's the added level, or what's the added layer that he's adding? When we take that first part, right? Im ein ani li mili. If I am not for myself, if I am not on behalf of myself, who will be on my behalf? The second, that's about being, sticking up for yourself or caring for yourself. And Hillel is claiming that if you don't care for yourself, who's going to care for you? That's a pretty stark kind of consideration. So many people look for other people to care for them, rightfully so. But Hillel says, you know what? It has to start with you. We have that very famous saying that Hillel modified. Remember, the Torah says, love your neighbor as yourself. So that saying assumes that you love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Hillel changed it. And Hillel said, you know what the whole Torah is? Don't do to anybody else what you wouldn't want done to you. Right? He makes it a little more practical. But now he's coming back, I think, to that same saying. And he's saying, remember what it says, love your neighbor as yourself. If you're not going to love yourself, who is going to love you? So the paradox of, in order to love somebody else, they have to love themselves. In order for other people to love you, you have to love yourself. And then how do we get out of that, self-regard? That becomes the next part of the sentence. Okay, we're over time here a little bit. John, last word for you. And
I
that's
just wanted, is there another way to read this? That if you say, if I'm not for myself, who is for me, you could say, well, that could be God. If I don't love myself, at least God would love me. And if I'm only for myself, if I only love myself, then I'm not loving God. So that's like a dead end both ways. Is there another way to, instead of framing it as relationship between people,
right.
frame it as a relationship?
So let's look at that next time. Try to remember that. And we'll try to look at that next time. Okay, good.
Yasher koach.
Yasher koach.
So,
Thank you.
Stay safe.